That's not it. Welcome, Resonators, to another ShawnSetGO video. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I think has been really pressing in the Wuthering wave space, and that is, are we experiencing power creep within the game? And so, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about, of course, was this, but a lot of people have been mentioning this because the game itself has had a number of characters being released that are exciting, exhilarating for a brand new game, and I think power creep comes into play, I think, the longer that a game comes out, because the more characters there are, the more chances are that you're replacing the characters you have. So for those of you who don't know, power creep occurs when characters introduced have significantly higher power levels, and there's also power spikes as well, in a couple conditions regarding those, but mainly with power creep. I think the main thing is that older characters become less relevant and less viable. I think leading into 1.1, most characters have had viable alternatives, despite there being like semi-clear rankings of how those characters are. I think that's totally fine. In my perspective, I think for the most part, when it comes to how characters rank, doesn't necessarily matter. You can have a number 1 and a number 10 ranking as long as both of them work effectively, clearly, and the people who play them like playing them. Then I don't necessarily think there's a total problem. However, like, I mean, let's go beyond like, hey, Jian had their place taken by jinhsi. Now jinhsi's the strongest, and now Changli's out. Maybe Changli's not the strongest, but now jinhsi and Changli has taken the place of being like strongest combo, like the strongest team. We're talking just beyond that. I think this is more of leading into the end game and having those multiple teams that this starts to become somewhat of an issue, even though you do need multiple teams and it is important to have a lot of good characters. I think the majority of the characters that have been released have been centered around a main DPS, maybe somewhat sub DPS, but very few 4-star resonators who are the staple to a few teams. And up until recently, where we had announcement of more characters, very few support characters and not a whole lot of dynamics to them. I mean, really the main DPS feature is that you have one character who's a hyper carry and then one character who works well with that character, but the majority of your time is spent giving as much uptime to one character. So really, is that a lot of variety? Is that a lot of interesting gameplay, or is it just really just power creep but with just extra dimensions to how many characters we're using? So like, what characters can be a filler to it? I mean, effectively, if you have a team that I'm looking at like this, really you're using Changli as much as possible, as much as humanly possible, whereas having another character in the game, something like Encore, the only reason you're putting her out is to really to the character swap and cancel swap as quickly as you can to get Changli back out there as much as possible, getting as much uptime. If you're thinking about optimal situations, it's really having an optimal combo, putting them out as much time as optimally can, and it becomes this power creep that's sort of unique to Wuthering Waves, which is it's a power creep of hyper carries. And I think what ends up happening is, leading into the new characters that have been released, the new Electro character, and now a new, I think, offensive support character. It's just enough to power creep out characters like Calcharo, just like jinhsi was enough power creep to edge out Jian. It's very slight, and I don't want to say it's major, but what ends up happening is we end up getting a lot of characters that capitalize on characters that have been either popular or really strong hyper carries in the game. So you can arguably keep those old characters in the game because this character now works, like Calcharo will now synergize with the new electric character, and then the new jinhsi character, of course, synergizes with our supports and synergizes with a number of characters that have already worked really well. But this pushes out those really good working characters, maybe not now, but somewhat down the line, if they continue to release characters in the same elements, being Glacio, or Spectro, Glacio, Electro, Fusion, and so on and so forth. So I think the issue that I'm foreseeing in just looking forward in the game is that I think that while it is interesting to see a lot of these characters bring a lot of interesting value to the game, there is a problem in that it's continuing down the same path of same elements, same situation that we had before, and then slowly just edging out those characters, not by being useless, but because there is a better, slightly optimal version until the previous version that you had is no longer a better option whatsoever. So looking into that, I think that causes power creep. Also, the lingering issue that I think has been noted and noticeable, which is there being not 0 weapon options and not like necessarily non-swappable items, because frankly a lot of the 5-star weapons are very swappable and very usable amongst other characters. So I'm not saying that the multiple weapon options, that there's 0 options available, but what I am saying is that in the, like, when you compare the differences between a 4-star weapon and the 5-star weapons, especially the exclusive weapons, there is such a vast difference. And unfortunately, we don't have a very well-developed crafting system in which we can have weapons that are designated and built specifically to provide the benefits that we're looking for in the game. So I think, unfortunately, while the weapon system is not the worst, I think there needs to be a much more involved 4-star weapon system that gives you viable options for when you don't have weapon exclusives, especially because the only viable 5-star weapon that you've received, if you're free to play and say you haven't gotten lucky, such as myself, is likely the one you got from the battle pass. And I don't think you necessarily claim that that's good enough. So I think that weapons need to have, at least 4-star weapons need to have much more viable options for players, so you're not relying so heavily on weapon exclusives. So I was going to go further into about how resources were scarce as well, and the farming techniques, but frankly, since I've just now started back up, I don't necessarily know how tough the resource scarcity has changed since the updates. I will say that leveling up resources, at least between 1.0 and 1.1, was a bit grindy, and I think they've acknowledged that. So I'm not going to say that, that's sort of, still in a bad state. But what I will say, and for those of you who haven't seen it, there's been drip marketing that's been put out for some new characters that I'll show you here in a second. Here we go. So 2 characters, the Shorekeeper has been shown, and Yoku as well, and kind of continuing along the lines of the power creep arguments, getting characters such as this, who is a Spectro support character, and then I believe a Glacio 4-star. It seems like we're doing less to fill the necessary gaps in the game and more like we're trying to edge out the current metas. Characters like Senhua, and characters like Verena, who have kind of been placeholders and have kind of not placeholders, but they could be kind of in the active meta in the game. So while I think that having characters like the most recent Glacio and Electros that were announced, or are close next heroes that were announced, while I think it is good that we're getting characters that are more dynamic, getting supports that are offensive supports, getting DPS that are support DPS and not just hyper carries, I think it seems that we're just power creeping those strong characters out and then more characters in. Now it's not fully making those new those old characters obsolete, but there is an obvious power difference. So something that I think would be interesting is if they sort of change these to focus on characters that have not been filled, 1, but also 2, I think it's a missed opportunity that the game is not providing complexity in those elements that they're trying to provide for, in the sense that, like, what if we had a fusion healer as opposed to an electro healer, or as opposed to Electros? Like, what would the differences in that look like? I think right now it's pretty like standard. A DPS is a DPS, a sub DPS provides some sort of benefit to your main DPS, and then a support heals, but their damage isn't great, right? So like I think right now what is a missed opportunity in my opinion is that some of our support characters don't necessarily have different methods. For example, if I were to think of like what a Havoc healer would look like, or Havoc support, it would be somebody who would sacrifice their own health but give it to others, or be able to similar to Dan Jin in a way. Or if I was thinking about a fusion healer, it would be something like characters that are burned you can derive healing from, similar to maybe how Electro would work, or Ice would work. If I freeze a character, then they can derive healing from that. So I think it's a missed opportunity to provide characters that are still within their class, or their role in the game, but also providing a unique moveset and dynamics to the game that haven't previously been done. So I think that this would be a great fix to this, because right now the variety that we're getting in the game is like, oh, this has a different move set, but this one's ultimately stronger. There's a clear hierarchy that's being developed. And I know it's still very early in the game. I'm not necessarily saying that power creep is overly evident, but I am saying that if it continues along these lines, it will be pushing out characters that were just acquired by people. And it seems like, to be honest, I mean, if this is like tinfoil hat theory, it seems like they knew that everyone got Calcharo and Varina, and that's why we're getting Electro heroes. That's why we're getting a Spectro support. Everyone's got Senwa, so why not get a new character that would take out Senwa potentially? And same thing with these new characters that I just showed at the drip marketing of. Let's get a character to push out Varina at some point. Let's get a character that pushes out a Glacio at some point. I just feel that's the way it feels. I might be wrong, but I'm not saying I'm against having these characters, or these characters aren't great additions to the game. But honestly, let's fill some of those other voids in the game instead of the places that already have great characters in them already. So that's my honest opinion with it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe to the page. I'm starting to do more Wuthering Waves content because I stopped playing Zenless Zone Zero, at least for now. So I hope to be making more content in this as I get back into the game. I took a bit of a break at 1.1. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, give it a like, and I hope to catch you Resonators in the next one. I know that sounds kind of weird. May fortune favor your journey. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.